My husband just threw divorce papers in my face and accused me of financial betrayal because he found my secret bank account with $40,000 in it. Money I earned by working myself to the bone at 2 jobs for 16 hours a day while he slept. Also, he could finish his PhD at a prestigious university without a single cent of debt. Now his mother is calling me a pathological liar and he is demanding half of that money as compensation for moral damages. Even though just a month ago he was literally crying on my shoulder, telling me I was the only person in the world who truly understood his dreams. Everything started exactly 3 weeks ago. Although the roots of this disaster go back much further to the day Mark received his acceptance letter. We were living in a cramped apartment in Austin at the time and we barely had any savings to our name, but he was so incredibly passionate about his research that I couldn't bring myself to be the person who said no to his future. We made a pact. He would focus entirely on his studies and his dissertation, while I would take on the full burden of our living expenses, the bills, and the mounting costs of his materials. In the beginning, it felt like a manageable sacrifice, but inflation and the hidden costs of his program quickly turned our daily life into a desperate struggle for survival. Mark is a man of great ambition, but he is completely disconnected from reality when it comes to actual numbers. He only saw his charts and his upcoming publications, while I was the one staring at electricity bills we couldn't pay and an empty refrigerator that I tried to hide from him. At the start of this month, the situation became critical when we received an eviction notice because of a delay in our rent, and Mark was on the verge of a total nervous breakdown. He couldn't focus on his writing and he kept repeating that he would have to drop out and work as a manual laborer. A thought that he said would effectively break his heart and waste years of his life. I saw him withering away and I made a decision that I now realize was the biggest mistake of my life. I didn't just stay at my 9-to-5 office job as a sales manager. I found a second job working night shifts for a logistics company on the other side of town, doing grueling, monotonous data entry that paid double because of the hours. I lied to Mark and told him I had been promoted to a senior role that required me to work remotely in the evenings and attend client meetings late at night just to explain why I was always on my laptop or leaving the house at odd hours. I knew he wouldn't approve if he knew the truth because he is a deeply proud man. And the mere thought of his wife slaving away in a warehouse office while he wrote chapters on quantum physics would have crushed his ego. So I opened a separate account and decided I would deposit every single cent from the second job there, intending to surprise him at the end of the month by paying off his entire tuition balance in one lump sum. I wanted to be his hero. I constantly imagined us sitting at a nice restaurant where I would tell him, "Mark, it's all handled, you don't have to worry about money anymore." That vision was the only thing that kept me going when I was falling asleep at my desk at 3 a.m., and when my eyes were burning from staring at endless spreadsheets. This entire month has been a blur of exhaustion where I have barely slept more than 4 hours a night. My day would start at 6 a.m. to make him breakfast and pretend I was heading to a normal office job, only to work my shift, return home, and immediately start the night work. Mark occasionally grumbled that I wasn't giving him enough attention or that I looked terrible, and was constantly irritable, but he never once stopped to ask how I was actually feeling or why I was losing weight. He was only concerned that dinner wasn't always hot when he decided he was hungry. I swallowed my resentment every time, thinking about the growing balance on that secret account. 10,000, 20,000, 35. I was so close to the goal. But a week ago, the walls started closing in when his mother, Linda, decided to visit us without any warning. Linda has always believed that I wasn't intellectual enough for her brilliant son, and she immediately started poking her nose into our business, checking the mail, and asking snide questions about how I could afford new shoes even though I bought them for $10 at a thrift store just to feel human again. Linda is the kind of person who feeds on suspicion, and she managed to convince Mark that my career growth was suspicious and that I was likely seeing someone else. Instead of talking to me like a husband, Mark started spying on me. He found a bank statement that I had stupidly left in the pocket of an old coat. He didn't see the sweat or the tears that went into that $40,000. He only saw a massive sum of money that his wife had hidden from him. Last night, he finally snapped and staged an intervention with his mother. He didn't ask where the money came from. He just started screaming that I had been skimming from our shared budget, while he was skipping meals to save money. He called me a cold, calculating liar who was building a nest egg to leave him the moment he got his degree. Every single attempt I made to explain that this was all from a second job I took for him was met with a wall of pure rage. He wouldn't even look at the pay stubs. He called Linda, and the two of them sat there dissecting my betrayal, as if I were a criminal. And then this morning he handed me the papers. He wants a divorce and he wants half of that account, because he claims it's marital property created through fraudulent concealment. I am sitting here in our kitchen, looking at these documents, unable to process that the man I nearly destroyed myself for is now trying to rob me of my last bit of security while calling me a monster. The silence in our apartment after Mark slammed the door was more deafening than all the screaming that had happened just an hour before. I stayed sitting on that hard kitchen chair for what felt like an eternity, staring at the legal papers which looked so professional and cold against the backdrop of our chipped IKEA table. I couldn't stop my hands from shaking, not because I was afraid of the divorce itself, but because of the sheer, soul-crushing exhaustion that was finally catching up with me now that the adrenaline had nowhere to go. To understand how we got to this point, you have to understand that my entire life for the last month has been a series of calculated lies designed to protect a man who apparently never needed my protection in the first place. I would wake up at 5:30 a.m., my muscles aching from the previous night's shift at the warehouse, and I would force myself to smile and make him coffee just so he wouldn't notice the dark circles under my eyes. I spent my days at my real job managing sales targets, and then I would stay late for a meeting, which was actually me driving 40 minutes to a windowless office in an industrial district to log shipping manifests until 3 in the morning. I did this every single day, including weekends, while Mark talked about the intellectual burden of his research, and how hard it was for him to focus when the apartment was tense. The irony is that I was doing it all to save our future, but in the process I became a stranger in my own home. I stopped telling him about my day because my day was just a repetitive cycle of labor and secrecy. When he would ask why I was so distant, I couldn't tell him I was thinking about the $400 I'd earned the night before that would go straight into the tuition fund. I just told him I was tired from the promotion, and he took that as an excuse to stop trying to connect with me. He started spending more time on the phone with Linda, and I could hear her voice through the walls, sharp and clinical, dissecting my character. She always told him that a woman who is too busy for her husband is a woman with something to hide. She planted the seeds of doubt, and Mark, who has always been more comfortable with theories than with the messiness of real human emotion, let those seeds grow into a forest of paranoia. He began checking my mileage on the car and looking through my browsing history, and because I was using a private browser to manage the second jobs portal, he convinced himself I was hiding an affair. Every time I tried to be affectionate, he pulled away, claiming he was too stressed with his final dissertation chapters. I felt so guilty for his stress that I pushed myself even harder, taking on extra weekend shifts that I didn't even tell him about, just to get to that $40,000 mark faster. I thought that once the debt was gone, we could be us again. I thought the money would buy back our happiness. But while I was counting pennies and skipping lunches to save an extra $5, Mark was building a case against me. He wasn't just suspicious. He was documented. He started keeping a log of every time I came home late and every time I received a notification on my phone. He didn't realize those notifications were just automated alerts from the logistics company about shift changes. He saw them as secret messages from a lover. And Linda was right there, whispering in his ear that he deserved better than a deceitful wife who was clearly planning to leave him once he became a successful doctor. 3 days ago, I actually reached the goal. I saw the balance hit $40,280, and I cried right there in my car in the warehouse parking lot at 4 a.m. I was so proud of myself. I thought I had saved us. I spent the next 2 days trying to find the right moment to tell him, but he was so cold and distant that I kept waiting for a good day. That good day never came. Instead, I found out that he had gone into my closet while I was in the shower, found my old winter coat, and discovered the bank statements I had hidden in the inner lining. He didn't come to me with questions. He went straight to his mother and then to a lawyer. He didn't want the truth. He wanted a narrative where he was the victim of a lying wife. What hurts the most isn't the accusation of an affair, because I know I've been faithful. It's the fact that he looked at that amount of money that represents every hour of sleep I lost, every meal I skipped, and every ounce of health I sacrificed, and his first thought wasn't how did she do this? But how much of this can I take? He actually had the audacity to tell me that because I misled him about our financial status, he had suffered emotional distress believing we were poor, and therefore he is entitled to the entirety of the savings as a settlement. He's not just leaving me. He's trying to harvest the fruits of my suffering while calling me a traitor. I realized this morning as I looked at a text from Linda saying I should be ashamed of my greed, that Mark hasn't just been influenced by his mother. He's exactly like her. He doesn't see me as a partner. He sees me as an asset that stopped performing the way he wanted. But as I started packing a small bag just to get away for a night, I stumbled upon something in his desk that he didn't mean for me to see. It was a folder from the university, and as I opened it, I realized that the financial crisis Mark had been complaining about for the last month might have been a complete fabrication. The folder was tucked under a pile of old research papers, and the moment I opened it, the room felt like it was spinning. It was an official letter from the university's financial aid office, dated exactly 1 month ago. It stated that Mark's fellowship had been upgraded to a full-ride scholarship, including a generous monthly stipend for living expenses that was more than enough to cover our rent and groceries. He had been receiving this money for weeks. He didn't have a financial crisis. He wasn't on the verge of dropping out. Every single tear he shed about working as a manual laborer, and every night he spent trembling with anxiety about our future was a calculated performance. He watched me work myself into a state of physical exhaustion, watched me grow thin and pale from lack of sleep, and he let me do it all while he sat on a secret pile of university cash. He was letting me pay for everything so he could stack his own private savings, and the only reason he's furious now is because he realized I was doing the exact same thing to him, except my money was actually earned through blood and sweat. I waited for him to come back from his mother's house that evening, sitting in total darkness. When he walked in and saw me, he didn't even turn on the light. He just let out a disgusted sigh and told me he didn't want to talk until his lawyer was present. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just held up the folder and watched his face drain of all color. I asked him how he could watch me come home at 4 a.m., shaking from caffeine and fatigue, knowing he had a $10,000 stipend sitting in his own account. Instead of apologizing, he snapped. He turned into someone I didn't recognize. He started screaming that it was his money, earned by his intellect, and that I had no right to it because I was just a sales drone who didn't understand the pressures of academia. He said he needed that cushion because he couldn't trust me, and my secret account proved he was right all along. The hypocrisy was so thick I could barely breathe. The argument escalated until it was a full-blown war. He called Linda on speakerphone, and she started shrieking through the phone that I was a financial predator who was trying to steal her son's hard-earned scholarship. They actually turned it around on me, claiming that my second job was a calculated insult to his manhood, and that I only did it to make him feel inferior. Then came the ultimatum that broke whatever was left of my heart. Mark looked me dead in the eye and said that if I didn't transfer the $40,000 to his account by tomorrow morning, he would go to my main office and tell my boss that I was stealing company time by working a second job on their clock. He knows my contract has a non-compete and a strict policy against outside employment. He isn't just trying to divorce me. He's trying to destroy my entire career and leave me with nothing. The tension in the apartment is now so heavy it feels physical. We are living in a nightmare where every word is a threat. He's locked himself in the bedroom, and I can hear him talking to Linda, plotting how they're going to frame this to our friends and family. They've already started posting vague things on Facebook about trust being broken and unmasking a liar. My phone is blowing up with messages from my sister-in-law calling me a gold digger, which is the most insane thing I've ever heard considering I'm the one who paid for every meal we've eaten in the last 3 years. I am backed into a corner. I have 12 hours to decide if I give up the money I nearly died for, or if I let him burn my entire life to the ground. But as I sat on the sofa, scrolling through my emails to see if I had any proof of his scholarship fraud, I found a deleted message in the trash bin of our shared computer that changed the entire game. It wasn't about money, and it wasn't about his PhD. The deleted email was from a local real estate attorney, and the subject line was, "Closing documents for 114 Willow Lane." My heart dropped into my stomach as I opened it. Mark hadn't just been hiding his scholarship money. He had been using it, along with a gift from his mother, to put a down payment on a small house in the suburbs, a house registered solely in his and Linda's names. The closing date was scheduled for next week. He wasn't planning a future with me. He was building a literal exit strategy. The divorce papers, he threw at me weren't a sudden reaction to finding my secret account. They were already drafted and waiting for the right moment. Finding my money was just the convenient excuse he needed to play the victim and try to snatch my savings to pay for his new furniture. I felt a cold, sharp clarity wash over me. The man I had spent the last month working 16-hour days for was never planning to stay. He had watched me exhaust myself, watched me skip doctor appointments for my chronic back pain from the warehouse shifts, and watched me cry over the electric bill. All while he was picking out paint swatches for a house I would never step foot in. I realized then that my betrayal wasn't a crime. It was my survival instinct kicking in before I even knew I was in danger. But there was something even darker in the email thread. There was a message from Linda to Mark saying, "Once the divorce is finalized and we have her savings, we can put in the pool. She's too stupid to realize she's just our scholarship for a better life." The sheer cruelty of it made me nauseous. They weren't just leaving me, they were harvesting me. I looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. In 8 hours, Mark expected me to hand over $40,000 or he would call my boss to ruin my life. He thought he had me trapped because he knew how much I valued my career. He thought I was the same girl who would do anything to keep the peace and protect his ego. He didn't realize that the woman who survived a month of manual labor and corporate politics on 4 hours of sleep isn't a girl anymore. She's a person who has nothing left to lose but her dignity. I spent the rest of the night not crying but documenting. I took photos of every document in that folder. I screenshotted every email. I recorded a video of the scholarship letter and the house closing documents. Then I did something I never thought I was capable of. I logged into our shared bank portal and saw that his private scholarship account was linked to our main profile because of a technicality he had overlooked when he set it up. I could see the balance. $22,000 of taxpayer-funded scholarship money that was supposed to be for living expenses for a married couple, which he had been hoarding while I paid for his life. I had two choices. I could take the deal, give him my hard-earned money, and walk away quietly just to save my job. Or I could take a massive risk that would either set me free or destroy both of us. If I reported his scholarship fraud to the university, they would revoke his PhD candidacy and demand the money back immediately. He would lose his house, his degree, and his future. But if I did that, he would definitely follow through on his threat to ruin my career, and Linda would make it her life's mission to sue me into oblivion. At 7 a.m., Mark walked out of the bedroom, dressed in his best suit, looking smug. He put a piece of paper on the table with his bank routing number. "You have 3 hours, Sarah," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Transfer the funds or I make the call. It's a small price to pay for your betrayal." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I didn't see the man I loved. I saw a parasite. I reached for my phone, but I didn't open my banking app. I opened my email and hit send on a draft I had been polishing for the last 4 hours. The email I sent wasn't to my bank, and it wasn't to the university, not yet. I sent it to Mark with his mother CC'd. It contained a PDF of every single screenshot I'd taken. The house closing documents, the scholarship award he'd hidden, and that sickening email from Linda about the swimming pool. I watched him open it on his phone. His smug expression didn't just fade, it disintegrated. He turned a shade of gray I didn't know a human could turn. I stood up, my legs finally steady despite the month of exhaustion, and I told him that if he so much as breathed the name of my employer, the university's ethics board and the IRS would receive the full file on his living expense fraud within 10 seconds. The next hour was the most raw, honest, and pathetic display of human nature I have ever witnessed. Mark went from a cold, calculating intellectual to a begging child. He tried to claim the house was a surprise for us, but the documents clearly stated it was a sole proprietorship for him and his mother. When I pointed that out, he started crying. The same manipulative tears that had kept me working 2 jobs for 30 days. But those tears didn't work anymore. I had seen the blueprint of his soul, and there was nothing there but greed. Linda called my phone 6 times in a row, her tone shifting from screaming threats of legal action to whimpering apologies about misunderstandings. I didn't answer. I just sat there watching the clock. I told Mark I was leaving. I told him he could keep his scholarship money and his house with his mother, but he was going to sign a post-nuptial agreement right then and there, waiving any and all claims to my secret account and my future earnings. He signed it with a shaking hand, realizing that his entire academic career, the thing he valued above everything else, hung by the thread of my silence. I walked out of that apartment with only one suitcase and my laptop, leaving behind the furniture I paid for and the man I thought was my partner. That was a week ago. I moved into a small, quiet Airbnb near the coast. The $40,000 is still in my account. I didn't use it to pay his tuition. I used a small portion of it to hire the best divorce attorney in the state, and the rest is going to be the down payment on a life that belongs only to me. My boss did eventually find out about my second job because I told him myself. I sat him down, explained the financial emergency I had been navigating, and showed him my performance metrics, which hadn't slipped once. He didn't fire me. He gave me a week of paid leave for burnout recovery. It turns out that when you stop lying to everyone, you realize who is actually on your side. I sometimes wonder if I should have just burned his world down, sent the files to the university anyway and watched him lose the house. But as I sit here watching the sun come up over the water, I realize that the greatest punishment for Mark isn't poverty. It's being Mark. He has to live the rest of his life knowing that he threw away the only person who would have died for him, all for a suburban house and a mother who treats him like an investment. He's still in that apartment, likely listening to Linda tell him it's all my fault, while he stares at a PhD dissertation that feels a lot more hollow than it did a month ago. Money is a strange thing. It can build a bridge to a future, or it can be the shovel you use to dig your own grave. I spent a month trying to buy someone's love and security, only to find out that the person I was really saving was myself. I'm still tired. My back still hurts when I wake up, and I still jump when my phone pings with a notification. But for the first time in a very long time, I'm not working for a ghost. I'm working for me. And that is worth every single hour of sleep I lost.